Tyler Brooks stares at the portable toilet door, his hand trembling on the handle. Inside, Elijah Stone is waiting. 6'8" of pure muscle, the foreman who's watched him with dark, intense eyes for 3 weeks. Tyler's never been with anyone, never been touched, never imagined his first time would be here, in a construction site, Porta-John, with a man whose presence makes him forget how to breathe. But when Elijah's deep voice rumbles through the plastic door, "You coming in or not, Brooks?" Tyler knows there's no turning back. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. 3 weeks earlier, Tyler Brooks had shown up to his first day at Hudson Valley Construction with sweaty palms and a resume that was 90% desperation and 10% truth. At 23, he'd burned through 4 different careers, none of them sticking, all of them leaving him feeling like he was playing a part that didn't fit. His parents had stopped asking what he was doing with his life. His friends had stopped inviting him out because he could never afford it. And Tyler had stopped pretending he had any idea what he was doing. Construction was supposed to be different. Physical labor, honest work, something that would tire his body enough that his mind would finally shut up at night. He'd gotten the job through a friend of a friend, showed up in brand new work boots that screamed rookie, and tried not to let his nerves show when the crew chief took one look at him and said, "You ever done this kind of work before?" Tyler had lied, said he'd done some landscaping, some renovation work with his uncle. The crew chief had looked skeptical, but shrugged and told him to report to the foreman. "Elijah Stone runs this site. You do what he says when he says it. He's tough but fair. Don't give him attitude and you'll be fine." Tyler had nodded, grabbed the hard hat he was given, and walked onto the job site feeling like he'd just stepped into another world. The noise hit him first. Power tools screaming, men shouting to each other over the din, the rhythmic pounding of hammers, and the beep of machinery backing up. Then the smells, sawdust and sweat and fresh concrete. And underneath it all, the scent of soil and diesel and something that smelled like possibility. He'd been looking around, trying to get his bearings, when he heard a voice that cut through all the noise like a knife through butter. "You the new hire?" Tyler turned and felt every coherent thought evaporate from his brain. The man standing in front of him was massive. Not just tall, though he had to be at least 6'8", but built like he'd been carved from stone. Broad shoulders that strained against his work shirt, arms that looked like they could lift a truck, and a chest that Tyler's brain immediately categorized as something he absolutely should not be staring at. His skin was deep brown, dark as rich coffee, with a sheen of sweat that caught the morning sun. His head was shaved clean, which only emphasized the strong lines of his face. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it could cut glass, and lips that were full and expressive even when set in what appeared to be a permanent expression of mild irritation. But it was his eyes that really got Tyler. Dark brown, almost black, with flecks of gold that caught the light when he tilted his head. Eyes that were currently looking at Tyler with an intensity that made him feel like he was being x-rayed, cataloged, and found wanting all in the span of 3 seconds. "I asked you a question," the man said, and his voice was deep and rough, the kind of voice that resonated in your chest when you heard it. "Yes," Tyler managed to squeak out, then cleared his throat and tried again. "Yes, sir. I'm Tyler Brooks. I'm supposed to report to Elijah Stone." Something that might have been amusement flickered across the man's face. "You're looking at him, and you don't need to sir me. Stone or Elijah is fine." His eyes traveled down Tyler's body in a way that should have felt clinical, assessing, but instead made Tyler's skin feel too hot. "You ever worked construction before, Brooks?" The lie sat on Tyler's tongue, but something about those eyes made him pause, made him think that Elijah Stone could spot bullshit from a mile away and wouldn't appreciate it. So instead, Tyler went with partial truth. "Some, not a lot. I'm a fast learner, though." Elijah's eyebrow rose fractionally. "That's so." It wasn't a question. "Well, we'll see about that. First rule on my site, you do what I tell you, when I tell you. Second rule, you don't touch equipment you haven't been trained on. Third rule, safety first, always. You wear your hard hat, your gloves, your safety glasses. You follow OSHA regulations. You see something unsafe, you tell me immediately. Questions?" "No," Tyler said. "Good. You're with me today. I want to see what you can do." Elijah turned and started walking, clearly expecting Tyler to follow. Tyler followed. That first day had been brutal. Elijah had worked him harder than Tyler had ever been worked in his life, testing him constantly, pushing him to see where he'd break. They'd moved lumber, mixed concrete, carried equipment across the site. Elijah had shown him how to read blueprints, how to use a level, how to measure twice and cut once. And through it all, Tyler had been hyper-aware of Elijah's presence. The way he moved with easy confidence despite his size. The way his muscles flexed when he lifted something heavy. The way sweat made his skin gleam. The way his voice sounded when he was explaining something, patient but firm. By lunch, Tyler's back was screaming. His hands were blistered despite the gloves, and he was pretty sure he'd pulled something in his shoulder. But he didn't complain, didn't slow down, kept pushing because something about the way Elijah looked at him made Tyler want to prove he could handle it. When they finally broke for lunch, Elijah had studied him with those intense eyes and said, "You did better than I expected. Most green guys tap out by noon on their first day." The praise had sent an unexpected warmth through Tyler's chest. "Thanks. Don't thank me yet. Afternoon's going to be harder." But there was something that might have been approval in Elijah's eyes when he said it. The afternoon had indeed been harder. They'd been working on framing, and Elijah had positioned himself behind Tyler to show him how to properly swing a hammer, how to drive a nail in 3 clean strikes. And Tyler had been acutely, painfully aware of how close Elijah was. Close enough that Tyler could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that when Elijah reached around him to adjust his grip on the hammer, Tyler's back had pressed against Elijah's chest, and he'd felt how solid, how immovable, how absolutely massive the man was. "Like this," Elijah had said, his breath warm against Tyler's ear as he guided Tyler's swing. "Use your whole body, not just your arm. Let the weight of the hammer do the work." Tyler had nodded, not trusting his voice, and tried to ignore the way his heart was racing, the way his skin felt electric where Elijah's hand wrapped around his wrist. He'd told himself it was just because he wasn't used to being this close to people while working, that it had nothing to do with the fact that Elijah was the most physically imposing, magnetically attractive man Tyler had ever been near. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of working under Elijah's watchful eye. 3 weeks of learning the trade, getting stronger, getting more confident with the tools and the work. 3 weeks of trying to ignore the way his body responded every time Elijah stood too close, every time their hands brushed passing a tool, every time Elijah's deep voice rumbled instructions that Tyler's brain insisted on interpreting as something entirely different than work-related. Tyler had never been attracted to men before. Had dated women in high school and college, had slept with exactly 2 of them in experiences that had been awkward and unmemorable, and had left him wondering what all the fuss was about. He'd assumed he just had a low sex drive, that he wasn't that interested in physical intimacy, that it wasn't a priority for him. Then Elijah Stone had walked into his life and blown that assumption to smithereens. Now Tyler lay awake at night thinking about his foreman in ways that should have horrified him, but instead just made him ache. He thought about Elijah's hands, large and calloused and capable of such precise control despite their size. He thought about Elijah's voice, the way it could be sharp and commanding one moment and warm and encouraging the next. He thought about Elijah's body, all that muscle and strength, and wondered what it would feel like to be held by someone that powerful, to be touched by those hands, to be wanted by someone like that. The thoughts terrified him. Tyler had never questioned his sexuality before, had never felt desire like this, had certainly never obsessed over another man the way he was obsessing over Elijah. He didn't know what to do with these feelings. Didn't know if they were normal, or if he was broken, or if maybe he'd been missing something fundamental about himself all along. What made it worse was that sometimes, just sometimes, Tyler thought he caught Elijah looking at him. Not the assessing looks of a foreman checking on his crew, but something else. Something that made Tyler's breath catch and his skin flush hot. The looks never lasted long, and Tyler could never be sure he wasn't imagining them, wasn't projecting his own desperate want onto a man who probably just saw him as another inexperienced laborer. The crew had noticed something, though. The way Elijah paired Tyler with him more often than not. keeping him close, teaching him personally instead of delegating to one of the senior guys. Some of the other workers ribbed Tyler about being the foreman's pet, but it was good-natured, no real malice in it. Stone never gives this much personal attention to the new guys, Jake, one of the more experienced carpenters, had said during a break. He usually throws you to the wolves and sees if you swim. Must see something in you. Tyler had tried not to read too much into that, tried not to let hope bloom in his chest at the idea that maybe, possibly, Elijah kept him close, for reasons that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with something neither of them was willing to acknowledge. Today had been particularly intense. They were working on the second floor of a new residential building, and the July heat was brutal. By mid-morning, everyone was soaked with sweat, shirts clinging to bodies, the air thick and humid. Elijah had stripped down to a tank top, and Tyler had spent the entire morning trying not to stare at the way Elijah's arms looked, all defined muscle and gleaming skin, trying not to notice the way Elijah's tank top clung to his chest and abs, outlining every ridge and plane, trying not to think about what it would be like to touch that skin, to feel all that strength under his hands. They'd been working in close quarters, the space tight as they installed electrical boxes. Elijah had been on a ladder while Tyler handed him tools, and at one point, Elijah had shifted his weight, and his leg had pressed against Tyler's shoulder. The contact had been brief, innocent, but it had sent electricity shooting through Tyler's body. He'd nearly dropped the wire cutters he'd been holding. "You okay down there, Brooks?" Elijah had asked, looking down at him with those dark, intense eyes. "Fine," Tyler had managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Just hot." Elijah had studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Yeah," he'd said finally, "it's hot." But the way he'd said it, the way his eyes had lingered on Tyler's face, had made Tyler wonder if they were still talking about the weather. The moment had passed. Elijah had gone back to work, and Tyler had tried to get his racing heart under control, but the tension between them had felt different after that. Thicker, more charged, like something was building, pressure accumulating, waiting for a catalyst to make it explode. Lunch came and went. The afternoon stretched on, the heat getting worse instead of better. Around 3, Elijah called for a water break, and the crew scattered to find shade and hydration. Tyler grabbed a bottle from the cooler and found a spot against the building, trying to cool down. He'd been sitting there for maybe 5 minutes when Elijah appeared, blocking out the sun as he stood in front of Tyler. Up close, Tyler could see the sweat beading on Elijah's shaved head, could see the way his chest rose and fell with deep breaths, could see the prominent evidence that Elijah was not unaffected by the heat or by exertion. "Walk with me," Elijah said. Not a question, a statement. Tyler stood, confused but obedient. They walked away from the main construction area, past the equipment, past the material stacks, until they were in a more isolated part of the site. Elijah stopped by the row of portable toilets, turning to face Tyler with an expression that was simultaneously guarded and intense. "We need to talk," Elijah said. Tyler's heart started hammering. "Okay. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest." Elijah's eyes bored into his. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Tyler said, though his voice was barely above a whisper. Elijah was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Then he said, "Are you attracted to me, Brooks?" The question hit Tyler like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at Elijah in shock. He should deny it, should laugh it off, should do anything except tell the truth. But Elijah had asked for honesty, and Tyler found himself incapable of lying to those eyes. "Yes," he said, the word barely audible. Elijah's jaw tightened. "How long?" "Since the first day." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "Since you walked up to me and I forgot how to function like a normal human being." Something flickered in Elijah's eyes. Not shock, not disgust. Something that looked almost like relief. "You've never been with a man before?" It wasn't a question, but Tyler answered anyway. "I've never been with anyone before. Not really. Not in any way that mattered." Elijah's eyes widened slightly at that. You're a virgin? Tyler's cheeks burned. Yeah, I know that's probably weird at 23, but I just never found the right person. And the few times I tried with women, it didn't feel right. And I didn't know why until you. And now I can't stop thinking about you. And I know this is completely inappropriate, and I should probably quit before this gets more awkward, but I can't seem to make myself do it because being near you is the best part of my day, even though it's torture, and I'm rambling, aren't I? Tyler. The use of his first name, spoken in that deep, rough voice, made Tyler's mouth go dry. Breathe. Tyler breathed. Elijah stepped closer, close enough that Tyler had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. I'm going to tell you something now, and you're going to listen carefully. I've been attracted to you since day one, too. Since you showed up in those brand new boots looking nervous and determined and so fucking pretty I couldn't think straight. I've spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself I was imagining it, that you were straight, that I was a terrible person for wanting my newest hire, who's young enough to be, well, not my son, but definitely someone I shouldn't be thinking about the way I've been thinking about you. Tyler's heart was trying to punch through his ribs. You've been thinking about me. Constantly. Elijah's voice dropped lower, more intimate. I've been thinking about teaching you things that have nothing to do with construction, about showing you what it feels like to be touched by someone who knows what they're doing, about being the one to introduce you to pleasure you've never imagined. His eyes searched Tyler's face. But before any of that happens, I need to know you understand what you'd be getting into. I'm not interested in a quick fuck. I don't do casual. If we cross this line, I'm all in. You'd be mine, Tyler. Completely. And I take care of what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared Tyler. Instead, it sent heat flooding through his body, pooling low in his belly. What if that's what I want? To be yours? Elijah's control visibly cracked, his eyes darkening with hunger. Then we're going to have a problem, because I've been trying real hard to be professional, and you just made that impossible. Maybe I don't want you to be professional anymore, Tyler said, surprised by his own boldness. Maybe I want you to show me all those things you've been thinking about. Elijah's hand came up to cup Tyler's face, his palm warm and rough against Tyler's cheek. The touch was gentle despite the size of his hand, almost reverent. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me, Tyler whispered. For a long moment, they just stood there, the tension between them so thick, Tyler could barely breathe. Then Elijah's thumb traced Tyler's bottom lip, and Tyler's lips parted automatically, a soft sound escaping him without permission. Not here, Elijah said, his voice strained. Not where anyone could see. You deserve better than that for your first time. I don't care where, Tyler admitted. I just need you to touch me. Please, Elijah, I'm going crazy. Elijah's eyes closed briefly, like he was fighting some internal battle. When they opened again, they were molten with desire. The Porta-John, he said. It's not romantic, it's not comfortable, but it's private. We can lock the door. No one will interrupt. Tyler glanced at the portable toilets and felt his stomach clench with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. It wasn't where he'd imagined his first time would be, but he didn't care. He just needed Elijah's hands on him, needed to know if this desperate want was mutual, needed to finally understand what everyone else seemed to know about desire and pleasure and connection. Okay, he said. Elijah's hand dropped from his face. You go in first. I'll follow in 2 minutes. That way if anyone sees, they'll just think we're using the facilities separately. Tyler nodded, his legs feeling shaky as he walked to the nearest Porta-John. He pulled the door open and stepped inside, his nose wrinkling at the chemical smell, his heart racing so fast he felt dizzy. The space was small, barely enough room for one person, let alone two, especially when one of those people was as large as Elijah. He stood there, staring at the door, counting seconds in his head. 90, 100, 120. At 140, there was a knock, and Elijah's voice rumbled through the plastic. "You coming in or not, Brooks?" Tyler reached for the handle. This was it, the moment everything changed. He opened the door. Elijah stepped inside, and immediately the small space felt impossibly smaller. He was so big, taking up so much room that Tyler had to press back against the wall to give him space to turn and lock the door. The lock clicked into place with a finality that made Tyler's breath catch. They stared at each other in the dim light filtering through the vents. Elijah's chest was rising and falling with deep breaths. His eyes locked on Tyler's face with an intensity that made Tyler feel like he was being devoured. "Last chance to change your mind," Elijah said, his voice rough. "Because once I start touching you, I'm not going to want to stop." "Don't stop," Tyler whispered. "Please don't stop." Elijah moved then, closing the distance between them in one step. His hands came up to frame Tyler's face, gentle despite their size, and he leaned down until their faces were inches apart. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said softly. "Tell me if it's too much." Then his lips were on Tyler's, and Tyler's entire world narrowed to that point of contact. Elijah kissed him slowly, carefully, like Tyler was something precious that might break. His lips were soft, his mouth warm, and when his tongue traced the seam of Tyler's lips, asking for entrance, Tyler opened for him without hesitation. The kiss deepened, and Tyler felt like he was drowning in the best possible way. Elijah tasted like mint and coffee, and the way his tongue moved against Tyler's was doing things to Tyler's body that he'd never experienced before. Heat was flooding through him, making his skin feel too tight, making him ache in places he'd never paid attention to. Elijah's hand slid from Tyler's face down to his shoulders, his waist, pulling him closer until their bodies were pressed together. Tyler gasped into the kiss when he felt the hard length of Elijah's arousal pressing against his hip, evidence of how much Elijah wanted this, wanted him. And lower, Tyler's own body was responding with embarrassing enthusiasm, his hardness straining against his work pants in a way that should have been humiliating, but instead just felt right. "God, you're responsive," Elijah murmured against Tyler's lips. "I've barely touched you, and you're already shaken." "Never felt like this before," Tyler admitted breathlessly. "Didn't know it could feel like this." Elijah pulled back just enough to look at him, his eyes dark with desire. "We're just getting started, beautiful. By the time I'm done with you, you're going to understand exactly what you've been missing." His hands moved to Tyler's shirt, fingers working the buttons with surprising deftness for such large hands. Tyler helped, suddenly desperate to feel skin against skin, and soon his shirt was hanging open, and Elijah's hands were on his bare chest, exploring, mapping, making Tyler gasp with every touch. "You're so responsive," Elijah said again, his voice full of wonder. "Every touch makes you shake. Every kiss makes you moan. You're perfect, Tyler. Absolutely perfect." The praise made Tyler's cheeks heat, but he was too far gone to be embarrassed. Elijah's hands were moving lower now, working Tyler's belt, and Tyler's brain was short-circuiting with anticipation and nervousness. "Elijah," he breathed, "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything," Elijah assured him, his fingers gentle as they worked Tyler's pants open. "Just feel. Just let me make you feel good." When Elijah's hand wrapped around Tyler's hardness, skin to skin, with nothing between them, Tyler actually cried out, the sensation so intense it almost hurt. He'd touched himself before, obviously, but having someone else's hand on him, especially Elijah's large, warm, capable hand, was an entirely different experience. "That's it," Elijah encouraged, his hand moving in slow, deliberate strokes that had Tyler's hips jerking involuntarily. "Let me hear you. No one can hear us in here. You can be as loud as you want." Tyler buried his face in Elijah's shoulder, overwhelmed by sensation, by pleasure he'd never experienced before. Elijah's hand felt incredible, the calluses adding texture that made every stroke feel impossibly good. But it was more than just physical. It was the way Elijah touched him with such care, such attention, like Tyler's pleasure was the most important thing in the world. "Elijah, I can't, it's too much," Tyler gasped out, already feeling himself approaching the edge. "Let go," Elijah commanded softly. "Come for me, Tyler. I want to see you fall apart." Tyler did, pleasure crashing over him in waves. That left him gasping and shaking. Elijah held him through it, stroking him through the aftershocks, whispering praise that made Tyler's chest feel tight with emotion as much as desire. When Tyler finally came back to himself, he found Elijah watching him with such heat in his eyes that Tyler felt his spent body trying to stir back to life. "That was just the beginning," Elijah said, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. "We're far from done, beautiful." "But you didn't," Tyler started, then stopped, not sure how to articulate what he meant. "This isn't about me yet," Elijah said. "This is about showing you what pleasure feels like, about teaching your body to crave this, about making sure your first time is something you'll remember for all the right reasons." "I want to touch you too," Tyler said shyly. "I want to make you feel good." Elijah's jaw clenched, his control visibly hanging by a thread. "Tyler, if you touch me right now, I'm going to lose what little control I have left." "Maybe I want you to lose control," Tyler said, emboldened by the pleasure still humming through his veins. "Maybe I want to see what you look like when you let go." Elijah groaned, the sound vibrating through his chest. "You're going to be the death of me." But he guided Tyler's hand to his own hardness, and Tyler wrapped his fingers around the thick length of him, awed by the size, by the heat, by the way Elijah's breath hitched when Tyler squeezed experimentally. "Like this?" Tyler asked, stroking the way Elijah had stroked him. "Exactly like that," Elijah managed, his hips rocking into Tyler's touch. "God, your hand feels so good." Tyler watched Elijah's face, fascinated by the way his expression shifted, the way his usually controlled features relaxed into pleasure. He felt powerful in a way he'd never felt before, knowing he could make this strong, confident man shake with want. But watching wasn't enough. Tyler wanted to taste, wanted to explore, wanted to know every inch of this man who'd awakened desires he hadn't known he possessed. Without overthinking it, Tyler dropped to his knees in the cramped space, looking up at Elijah with nervous anticipation. Elijah's eyes widened. "Tyler, you don't have to." "I want to," Tyler interrupted. "Show me how. Teach me." Elijah's control shattered completely. His hand came down to cup Tyler's face, thumb tracing his cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're going to kill me," he said, voice wrecked. "Okay. Start slow. Use your tongue first. Just explore. Get used to the taste, the feel. There's no rush." Tyler leaned forward, heart pounding, and tentatively ran his tongue along Elijah's length. The taste was different than he'd expected, salt and musk and something uniquely Elijah. He heard Elijah's sharp intake of breath, felt the muscles in Elijah's thighs tense, and felt a surge of confidence. He was doing this. He was making Elijah feel good. Encouraged, Tyler grew bolder, using his tongue more confidently, exploring every inch he could reach. When he finally took Elijah into his mouth, just the tip at first, Elijah's hand tightened in his hair, not forcing, just holding, grounding. "That's it," Elijah praised, his voice shaking. "Just like that. Take your time, only what feels comfortable." Tyler wanted to take more, wanted to give Elijah everything, but Elijah was thick, and Tyler's jaw was already starting to ache. He pulled back, looking up at Elijah with worried eyes. "It's okay," Elijah assured him immediately. "You don't have to take it all. Use your hand too. That feels incredible." Tyler did, wrapping his hand around what he couldn't fit in his mouth, finding a rhythm that had Elijah's breathing going ragged, had his hips rocking forward in small, controlled thrusts. Tyler felt powerful, intoxicated by the evidence of Elijah's pleasure, by the way this strong, controlled man was coming undone from Tyler's inexperienced touch. "Tyler," Elijah gasped out, his voice strained. "I'm close. You need to pull back unless you want." But Tyler didn't pull back. He wanted this, wanted all of it, wanted to give Elijah the same shattering pleasure Elijah had given him. He hummed around Elijah's length, and that seemed to be the final straw. Elijah's hand tightened in his hair as he found his release, and Tyler did his best to take it, to swallow, to accept this gift of Elijah's pleasure. When it was over, Elijah pulled Tyler up gently, claiming his mouth in a kiss that was equal parts grateful and possessive. "You're incredible," he murmured against Tyler's lips. Absolutely incredible. I can't believe that was your first time doing that. Tyler felt warmth bloom in his chest at the praise. Did I do okay? Better than okay, Elijah said, his hands framing Tyler's face. You were perfect. But Tyler, we need to talk about what happens next, because this changes everything. I know, Tyler said, and I don't care. I want this. I want you, however that looks. Elijah's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Then we do this right. We keep it professional on the site during work hours. But after, you're mine. We'll take things at your pace, teach you everything, show you pleasures you've never imagined. But I need your honesty always. If something doesn't feel right, if you're overwhelmed, if you need to slow down, you tell me. Deal. Deal? Tyler agreed, feeling like his heart might burst from how much he wanted this. Wanted Elijah. Wanted everything they could build together. Elijah kissed him again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. When they finally pulled apart, reality began creeping back in. They were still in a Porta-John on a construction site, and they'd been gone too long. We need to get back before people notice, Elijah said reluctantly. You go first. I'll follow in 5 minutes. And Tyler, tonight you're coming home with me. We're going to do this properly, in a bed, where I can take my time with you. Tyler's breath caught at the promise in those words. Okay, he managed. They straightened their clothes, made themselves presentable. Before Tyler could reach for the door, Elijah pulled him back for one more kiss, this one sweet and full of promise. Tonight, Elijah said again. My place, 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Tyler nodded, unable to form words, and slipped out of the Porta-John on shaky legs. His whole world had just shifted on its axis, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. Tyler could barely concentrate on anything except the memory of what had just happened and the anticipation of what was coming tonight. Every time he glanced at Elijah, he found those dark eyes already on him, filled with heat and promise that made Tyler's stomach flutter with nervous excitement. The other crew members didn't seem to notice anything different, which was both a relief and somehow disappointing. Tyler felt like he'd been fundamentally changed, like surely everyone could see it written all over his face. But Jake just asked him to help carry some 2x4s, and Marcus complained about the heat, and everything continued exactly as it had before, even though Tyler's entire world had shifted. When 5 o'clock finally arrived and Elijah called it for the day, Tyler's hands were shaking as he gathered his tools. His phone buzzed with a text, Elijah's name on the screen, an address Tyler didn't recognize, and 3 words that made his pulse race. See you tonight. Tyler drove home in a daze, showered quickly, changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blue button-down that his sister had once said brought out his eyes. He looked at himself in the mirror, taking in his flushed cheeks, his 2 bright eyes, the way he couldn't stop smiling, and thought about how different he looked from the nervous guy who'd shown up to that construction site 3 weeks ago. The drive to Elijah's place took 20 minutes, bringing Tyler to a modest but well-kept neighborhood he'd never been to before. The house was a small craftsman style, with a neat front yard and a truck parked in the driveway. It looked solid, well-maintained, like everything about Elijah. Tyler sat in his car for a full minute, trying to calm his racing heart, before finally forcing himself to walk up to the front door. He'd barely raised his hand to knock when the door opened, and there was Elijah, freshly showered and wearing jeans and a fitted t-shirt that showed off his incredible build. You came, Elijah said, something like relief in his voice. You thought I wouldn't, Tyler asked. Part of me worried you'd come to your senses and realize getting involved with your foreman was a terrible idea. Elijah stepped back to let Tyler inside. The house was neat and masculine, furnished simply but with care. Photos on the walls showed Elijah with people Tyler assumed were family, a woman who had his eyes, younger people who might be siblings. Everything about the space felt solid and real and lived in. Your home is nice, Tyler said, suddenly nervous again now that they were alone in private space. now that there was a bed somewhere in this house and the explicit understanding of what was going to happen. "Thank you." Elijah closed the door and turned to face Tyler fully. "Are you hungry? I can make dinner, or we can order something. We don't have to rush into anything. I want you comfortable." The consideration made Tyler's chest ache. "I'm not hungry for food," he admitted quietly. Elijah's eyes darkened. "What are you hungry for, Tyler?" "You," Tyler said simply. "I want you to show me everything. I want to know what it feels like to be with you completely. I've been thinking about it all afternoon, and I'm ready. I'm nervous, but I'm ready." Elijah crossed the space between them in 2 steps, pulling Tyler into his arms. The kiss was deep and thorough and filled with barely restrained hunger. When they finally broke apart, Elijah's breathing was unsteady. "Bedroom," he said, taking Tyler's hand and leading him down a short hallway. Elijah's bedroom was as neat as the rest of the house, dominated by a large bed with dark blue sheets. Tyler stared at that bed, his heart hammering, knowing that everything was about to change. "Hey," Elijah said softly, turning Tyler to face him. "We go at your pace. If anything hurts or feels wrong, you tell me immediately. This is about pleasure for both of us, and I won't enjoy it if you're not enjoying it. Understand?" Tyler nodded, then found his voice. "I trust you." Those 3 words seemed to affect Elijah deeply. His expression softened, became almost reverent. "I'm going to take such good care of you," he promised, "going to make this so good for you that you'll never want anyone else." Then he was kissing Tyler again, walking him backward toward the bed. When Tyler's legs hit the mattress, Elijah lowered him down carefully, following him, covering Tyler's smaller body with his own larger frame. The weight of him felt incredible, grounding and arousing all at once. Elijah's hands worked Tyler's shirt open, then pushed it off his shoulders. He took his time exploring Tyler's chest with hands and mouth, finding sensitive spots that made Tyler gasp, learning what touches made Tyler's back arch off the bed. By the time Elijah's mouth found Tyler's hardness, Tyler was already trembling with need. "Please," Tyler heard himself beg. "Elijah, please." "Please what?" Elijah asked, his breath hot against sensitive skin. "I need more. I need you. All of you." Elijah pulled back to look at Tyler, his eyes searching. "You're sure? We can take this slow. Work up to it over time." "I'm sure," Tyler said firmly. "I want my first time to be with you, right now, in your bed. I want to remember this forever." Elijah's control visibly cracked. He stood up long enough to strip off his own clothes, and Tyler's breath caught at the sight of him. Elijah was magnificent, all muscle and smooth dark skin, and barely contained power. And he was looking at Tyler like Tyler was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "You're so beautiful," Elijah said, joining Tyler on the bed again. "I'm going to take my time preparing you. It's going to feel strange at first, but I promise it will get better. Trust me?" "Always," Tyler breathed. Elijah was patient and thorough, working Tyler open with gentle fingers and whispered praise. It did feel strange at first, unfamiliar and slightly uncomfortable, but Elijah was attentive, watching Tyler's face for any sign of real pain, adjusting his movements, finding angles that made Tyler gasp with unexpected pleasure. "There," Elijah said with satisfaction when Tyler's back arched off the bed. "Found it. That's your sweet spot, beautiful. By the time I'm inside you, you're going to be begging for more." He was right. By the time Elijah positioned himself at Tyler's entrance, Tyler was shaking with need, desperate to be filled, to be joined with Elijah completely. When Elijah finally pushed inside, slow and careful and relentless, Tyler felt overwhelmed by the fullness, by the stretch, by the intensity of being connected to another person this way. "Breathe," Elijah coached, holding still to let Tyler adjust. "Just breathe through it. Your body knows what to do." Tyler breathed, focusing on Elijah's face, on the care and desire he saw there. And slowly, the discomfort faded, replaced by something else. Something that felt like completion, like coming home, like finally understanding what his body had been craving all along. "Move," Tyler whispered. "Please move." Elijah moved, slow at first, building a rhythm that had Tyler clutching at his shoulders, wrapping his legs around Elijah's waist to take him deeper. Every thrust hit that spot inside Tyler that made him see stars, building pleasure to impossible heights. "That's it," Elijah encouraged, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. "Take all of me. You're doing so good, feeling so perfect. Never felt anything like this before." Tyler couldn't form words anymore, could only hold on as Elijah moved inside him, claiming him, marking him, making him understand exactly what he'd been missing his whole life. This was what connection felt like. This was what desire felt like. This was what it felt like to be wanted completely. When his release finally crashed over him, Tyler cried out Elijah's name like a prayer, his body clenching around Elijah's length in waves of pleasure that seemed endless. He felt Elijah follow moments later, felt the warmth of Elijah's release inside him, felt Elijah's whole body shudder with the force of his completion. They collapsed together, sweat slicked and breathing hard. Elijah pulled Tyler against his chest, pressing kisses to his forehead, his cheeks, his lips, whispering words of praise that made Tyler's chest feel tight with emotion. "You okay?" Elijah asked eventually. "How do you feel?" "Incredible," Tyler admitted, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea it could feel like that. Is it always like that?" "No," Elijah said honestly. "It's not always like that. What we just had, that kind of connection, that's rare. That's special. That's what happens when two people are meant to be together." Tyler's heart stuttered at the implication. "Meant to be together?" Elijah pulled back enough to look at Tyler's face. "I told you I don't do casual. I meant it. This isn't just physical for me, Tyler. I'm falling for you. Have been since day one. And after tonight, after being inside you, after seeing you come apart in my arms, I know I'm not letting you go." The possessive declaration should have scared Tyler. Instead, it made him feel cherished, wanted, safe. "I'm falling for you too," he admitted. "I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I can't help it. You make me feel things I've never felt before." "Then we figure this out together," Elijah said firmly. "We keep it professional at work, but outside of work, you're mine. And I take care of what's mine, Tyler. That means making sure you're happy, safe, satisfied in every way. That means being the partner you deserve." They talked for hours, lying tangled together in Elijah's bed, making plans and promises. Eventually they made love again, slower this time, more tender, with Elijah showing Tyler different positions, different angles, different ways to find pleasure together. By the time Tyler finally fell asleep in Elijah's arms, the sun was starting to rise, and he felt more content than he'd ever felt in his life. The next few months were an education in every sense of the word. Tyler learned construction skills during the day, becoming more confident with tools and techniques, earning the respect of the crew through hard work and dedication. But at night, he learned other skills entirely. Elijah was a patient and thorough teacher, introducing Tyler to pleasures he'd never imagined, always attentive to Tyler's responses, always making sure Tyler felt cherished and satisfied. Their second week together, Elijah took Tyler to a hardware store, of all places, and Tyler had watched with fascination as Elijah's whole demeanor changed. This was Elijah in his element, discussing the merits of different drill bits with the same passion some men reserved for sports. Tyler found himself captivated not just by the knowledge Elijah possessed, but by the way he lit up when talking about his craft. "You really love this, don't you?" Tyler had asked as they loaded lumber into Elijah's truck, building things, creating something from nothing. Elijah had paused, a 2x4 balanced on his shoulder, and looked at Tyler with such warmth it made Tyler's breath catch. "I love creating things that last," he'd said, "things that matter, houses, where families will grow up, buildings where people will work and dream and live their lives. There's something honest about construction. You put in the work, you see the results. No corporate politics, no backstabbing, just solid craftsmanship." "Is that why you became a foreman?" Tyler had asked. "Started swinging a hammer when I was 16, Elijah had said, loading the lumber into the truck bed. "My father was a contractor, taught me everything he knew before he passed. Being a foreman means I get to teach others, pass on what I learned, shape the next generation of builders. He'd looked at Tyler with an intensity that made Tyler's knees weak. "And sometimes I get lucky enough to find someone with real potential, someone worth investing in." The way he'd said it, Tyler knew he wasn't just talking about construction skills. That night, Elijah had shown Tyler what it meant to be worshipped. He'd spent hours exploring Tyler's body, finding every sensitive spot, every place that made Tyler gasp or moan or arch off the bed. He'd used his mouth and hands with devastating skill, bringing Tyler to the edge over and over before finally letting him fall. And when Elijah had finally entered him again, it had been slow and deep and so intense that Tyler had actually cried from the overwhelming emotion of it. "I've got you," Elijah had murmured, wiping away Tyler's tears with gentle thumbs. "Always going to take care of you. You're safe with me." And Tyler had believed him, still believed him, months later. They developed routines. Tyler would arrive at Elijah's house most evenings, and they'd cook dinner together. Elijah taught Tyler how to season a steak properly, how to make his mother's rice and beans recipe, how to chop vegetables without losing a finger. They'd eat at the small dining table, talking about their days, about projects at work, about plans for the weekend. After dinner, they'd often sit on the back porch, Elijah in the old rocking chair that had been his father's, Tyler perched on the porch railing, and they'd watch the sunset while sharing a beer. Those quiet moments became some of Tyler's favorites. No pressure to perform or impress, just existing together in comfortable silence. The physical intimacy remained intense. Elijah had an appetite that matched his size, and Tyler discovered he had a matching hunger. Some nights they'd barely make it through the front door before they were tearing at each other's clothes. Other nights, Elijah would draw it out for hours, teasing Tyler until he was begging, desperate for release, that Elijah would grant only when he was satisfied Tyler had learned whatever lesson he was teaching. "Patience," Elijah would murmur, his hands everywhere except where Tyler needed them most. "Good things come to those who wait." Tyler learned patience. He also learned stamina, flexibility, and the particular kind of pleasure that came from surrendering control to someone who wielded it responsibly. 3 months in, Elijah took Tyler to meet his mother. Tyler had been terrified, convinced she would hate him, would think he wasn't good enough for her son. But Rosa Stone had taken one look at him, pulled him into a hug that rivaled Elijah's in strength, and declared that anyone who made her baby smile the way Tyler did was family. Over Sunday dinner, surrounded by Elijah's siblings and their families, Tyler had felt something shift in his chest. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Warm and welcoming and full of laughter. His own family had always been so formal, so concerned with appearances and achievements. But here, no one cared that Tyler had bounced between careers or that he was dating his boss. They cared that he made Elijah happy. Elijah's youngest sister, Carmen, had cornered Tyler in the kitchen while he was helping with dishes. "I've never seen him like this," she'd said, watching Elijah through the doorway as he played with her kids. "He's always been so serious, so focused on work and responsibility. But with you, he laughs more, smiles more. Thank you for that." Tyler had felt tears prick his eyes. "He's changed my life," he'd admitted. "I didn't even know who I was before I met him." Carmen had hugged him. "That's what the right person does. They help you become who you were always meant to be." They were discreet at work, but the crew eventually figured it out anyway. It was hard to miss the way Elijah looked at Tyler when he thought no one was watching, or the way Tyler's whole face lit up when Elijah praised his work. To Tyler's relief, no one seemed to care. Jake made a few good-natured jokes about Tyler being the foreman's favorite, but it was clear there was no real judgment behind it. One afternoon, about 4 months into their relationship, Tyler had been working on installing cabinet frames when he'd made a mistake, cut a piece too short, wasted expensive material. He'd been berating himself, frustrated and embarrassed, when Elijah had appeared at his elbow. "Mistakes happen," Elijah had said calmly. "What matters is what you learn from them. Measure again, cut a new piece, and this time you'll get it right." But Tyler had been too deep in his own head, too caught up in feeling like a failure. "I should know better by now," he'd snapped. "I keep messing up simple things." Elijah had waited until the other crew members were out of earshot, then had gripped Tyler's shoulder firmly. "Hey, look at me." When Tyler had reluctantly met his eyes, Elijah's expression had been serious but kind. "You're being too hard on yourself. You've learned more in 4 months than most guys learn in a year. You're good at this, Tyler. One mistake doesn't change that." The praise had melted Tyler's frustration. "You're just saying that because we're together." "I'm saying it because it's true," Elijah had corrected. "And at work, I'm your foreman first. I wouldn't keep you on this crew if you weren't pulling your weight, relationship or not. You've earned your place here through hard work and dedication. Don't doubt that." Later that night, in bed, Elijah had showed Tyler exactly how much he appreciated his dedication. Had taken Tyler apart with his usual skill, but with extra tenderness, extra care, until Tyler was a trembling, satisfied mess. "You're so hard on yourself," Elijah had murmured afterwards, Tyler tucked securely against his chest. "I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. Strong, capable, absolutely incredible." Tyler had turned in Elijah's arms to face him. "How do you always know what I need? How do you read me so well?" Elijah had traced Tyler's jawline with gentle fingers. "Because I pay attention. Because you matter to me. Because learning you is the best education I've ever had." They'd made love again then, slow and deep, with Elijah whispering praise and promises that made Tyler's heart feel too full for his chest. The challenges came too. There was the time Tyler's college roommate had come to visit and made a snide comment about Tyler playing gay for a sugar daddy. Tyler had punched him, actually punched him, breaking his own hand in the process. Elijah had driven him to the emergency room, holding his good hand the whole way, his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. "He had no right to talk about you that way," Tyler had said through gritted teeth as a doctor wrapped his fractured knuckles. "No, he didn't," Elijah had agreed. "But violence isn't the answer, baby. You could have been seriously hurt." "I was defending us," Tyler had protested. Elijah had waited until they were alone in the truck before responding. "I appreciate that you want to defend our relationship, but Tyler, I need you to understand something. I don't care what ignorant people think about us. Their opinions don't matter. What matters is what we know to be true, that we love each other, that what we have is real and right and good." He'd cupped Tyler's face gently. "I need you safe more than I need you to fight my battles." Tyler had learned something important that day about picking his battles, about not letting other people's prejudice dictate his actions. The college roommate had left the next day, and they'd never heard from him again. There was also the time Tyler had gotten jealous when a new hire, a young woman named Melissa, had clearly developed a crush on Elijah. She'd found excuses to seek him out, had laughed too loudly at his instructions, had touched his arm unnecessarily when asking questions. Tyler had stewed in silence for a week before Elijah had finally called him on it. "You going to tell me what's bothering you, or are we going to keep pretending everything's fine when you're clearly upset?" They'd been in Elijah's kitchen, and Tyler had been aggressively chopping vegetables for dinner. "I'm not upset." "Tyler." Elijah had taken the knife from his hand and set it aside. "Talk to me." "It's stupid," Tyler had muttered. "If it's bothering you, it's not stupid." Elijah had tilted Tyler's chin up, forcing eye contact. "What's going on?" Tyler had felt his cheeks heat with embarrassment. "Melissa, the way she looks at you, the way she touches you." Understanding had dawned in Elijah's eyes, followed by something that looked like tenderness. "You're jealous." "I said it was stupid," Tyler had said defensively. "It's not stupid. It's human." Elijah had pulled Tyler into his arms. "But baby, you have nothing to worry about. I'm not interested in Melissa or any woman. I'm only interested in you. She could strip naked in front of me, and all I'd do is fire her for inappropriate workplace conduct." Despite himself, Tyler had laughed. "Really? Really?" Elijah had kissed him thoroughly. "You're it for me, Tyler Brooks. No one else even registers. And if her attention is making you uncomfortable, I'll have a professional conversation with her about boundaries." He had, the very next day, and Melissa had backed off immediately. Tyler had felt foolish for doubting Elijah, but also cherished that Elijah had taken his feelings seriously enough to address the situation. 6 months in, Tyler moved into Elijah's house. It just made sense, he reasoned. He was spending every night there anyway, and his lease was up, and Elijah had made it clear he wanted Tyler in his space, in his life, in his bed every night. The actual move had been chaotic and wonderful. Elijah's siblings had shown up to help, turning what should have been a stressful day into a party. Carmen had brought food, his brother Marcus had brought beer, and they'd spent the day hauling Tyler's modest possessions into Elijah's house, while sharing embarrassing stories and laughing until Tyler's sides hurt. "This is all you own?" Marcus had asked, looking at Tyler's few boxes of belongings. Tyler had shrugged, feeling self-conscious. "I've moved around a lot, learned to travel light." Elijah had wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "Means we get to fill the house with things we choose together. Make it ours instead of just mine." And they had. Over the next few weeks, they'd gone shopping together. Tyler's input transforming Elijah's bachelor pad into a real home. They'd picked out new dishes together, new towels, a comfortable couch where they could curl up together to watch movies. Tyler had insisted on getting plants for the living room, arguing that the space needed life and color. Elijah had teased him about becoming domestic, but Tyler had caught him talking to the plants when he thought Tyler wasn't listening, and his heart had melted a little more. The first morning Tyler had woken up in their bed, in their house, with Elijah's arm draped possessively across his waist and sunlight streaming through their windows. He'd felt something click into place. This was home, not a building, not an address, but the feeling of belonging somewhere completely. They'd established new routines. Saturday. Mornings were for sleeping in and lazy lovemaking. Sunday mornings, Tyler would make pancakes while Elijah read the paper, and they'd eat breakfast on the back porch regardless of weather, bundled in blankets when it got cold. Tuesday evenings were for Rose's family dinners, where Tyler had become a fixture at the table, expected and welcomed. But it wasn't all domestic bliss. Living together meant seeing each other's flaws, dealing with each other's habits and quirks. Elijah was a morning person who woke up energized and ready to tackle the day. Tyler was decidedly not, and required at least 2 cups of coffee before he could form coherent sentences. The first time they'd fought, really fought, had been over something stupid. Tyler had forgotten to pick up milk on his way home, and Elijah had snapped at him after a particularly stressful day at work. Tyler had snapped back, and suddenly they were arguing about milk when they were really arguing about communication and expectations and the stress of blending 2 lives together. It had ended with Tyler storming out to the garage, planning to cool off, but Elijah had followed him, and they'd stood there in the dim light among the tools and equipment until Elijah had said, "I don't want to fight with you over milk." "Me neither," Tyler had admitted. "I'm sorry I snapped," Elijah had said. "Bad day at work, but that's not an excuse to take it out on you." "I'm sorry I forgot the milk. I'll set reminders on my phone." They'd come together then, kissing away the harsh words, reaffirming their commitment. "We're going to fight sometimes," Elijah had said. "That's normal. What matters is that we don't let it fester. We talk it out. We apologize, we forgive, and we move forward together." Tyler had learned that lesson well. They had arguments, sure, but they never went to bed angry. They always talked things through, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to avoid the conversation. Living together also meant Tyler got to see sides of Elijah he'd never seen before, like the fact that Elijah sang in the shower old R&B songs in a voice that was surprisingly good, or that he had a sweet tooth and would sneak cookies before dinner when he thought Tyler wasn't looking, or that he cried during certain movies. Though he'd deny it if asked, Tyler discovered that Elijah had nightmares sometimes, waking up gasping from dreams he wouldn't talk about. Tyler learned to hold him during those nights, to whisper soothing words until Elijah's breathing evened out and he fell back asleep. And Elijah learned about Tyler's insomnia, the nights when his mind wouldn't shut off and sleep felt impossible. Elijah would make him chamomile tea, would read to him in that deep, rumbling voice until Tyler's eyes grew heavy, would hold him close, and provide the sense of safety that finally allowed Tyler to rest. They learned each other's bodies with the kind of intimacy that only comes from time and attention. Elijah knew that kissing the spot just below Tyler's ear would make him melt. Tyler knew that running his hands down Elijah's back in long, firm strokes would relax him after a hard day. They developed their own language of touch, silent communications that needed no words. Their physical relationship deepened too. What had started as Elijah teaching Tyler evolved into true partnership. Tyler grew more confident, learned what he liked, learned how to ask for what he wanted. He surprised Elijah one night by taking control, pushing him down on the bed and taking his time exploring every inch of Elijah's body, the way Elijah had explored his. "Where did you learn that?" Elijah had gasped when Tyler did something with his tongue that made his eyes roll back. "Good teacher," Tyler had said with a wicked grin. They experimented, trying new things, learning each other's boundaries and preferences. Some things worked spectacularly, others didn't, and they'd laugh about it and move on. But through it all, the foundation remained the same: trust, communication, and genuine desire to bring each other pleasure. Work became more interesting as Tyler's skills developed. Elijah started trusting him with more complex tasks, letting him take the lead on certain aspects of projects. Tyler discovered he had a good eye for design, could visualize how spaces would come together in ways that impressed even the senior crew members. One day, about 8 months into working for Elijah, the site manager had pulled Tyler aside. "Stone's teaching you well," he'd said. "Ever think about getting your contractor's license? You've got the aptitude for it." Tyler had been shocked. "I've only been doing this less than a year." "Talent doesn't care about timelines," the manager had said. "Think about it. Guys like you, who have the technical skills and the people skills, they're rare. You could go far in this industry." That night, Tyler had mentioned it to Elijah over dinner. "Do you think I could do it? Get my license? Become a contractor?" Elijah had set down his fork and looked at Tyler with pride in his eyes. "I think you could do anything you set your mind to. You've already proven that." They'd talked late into the night about possibilities, about Tyler's future, about what he wanted to build, not just with his hands, but with his career. Elijah had shared his own dreams of starting his own contracting company someday, something small and focused on quality over quantity. "We could do it together," Tyler had said, the idea forming as he spoke. "Partners, equal partners." Elijah had pulled Tyler into his lap, kissing him thoroughly. "I like the sound of that. Partners in everything." They'd started making plans that night, real plans for a future that extended beyond the next job, the next project. Tyler enrolled in night classes to work toward his license. Elijah started researching what it would take to start their own company. They set goals, made timelines, dreamed together about what they could build. Tyler's parents were harder to convince. They'd never imagined their son with a man, let alone a construction foreman 8 years older than him. The first dinner had been awkward, Tyler's mother making thinly veiled comments about Tyler finding himself, and his father barely speaking at all. But Elijah had been patient and respectful, answering their questions honestly, never getting defensive even when Tyler's father implied that maybe Tyler was just confused, going through a phase. "With all due respect, sir," Elijah had said calmly, "your son knows his own heart, and I know mine. I love Tyler. I plan to spend my life with him, if he'll have me. I understand this isn't what you expected for him, but I hope in time you'll see that I'm going to do everything in my power to make him happy." The sincerity in Elijah's voice, the obvious love in his eyes when he looked at Tyler, had cracked something in Tyler's mother. When they met Elijah, saw how he treated Tyler with such care and respect, saw how happy Tyler was, they came around. Tyler's mother had pulled him aside during their first dinner together and said, "I've never seen you this happy, sweetheart. That's all I ever wanted for you." His father had taken longer, but eventually came around when he saw Tyler thriving, saw him building a real career, saw him settled and content in ways he'd never been before. "Elijah's good for you," he'd finally admitted. "I can see that now. I'm sorry it took me so long." A year after that first day on the construction site, Elijah took Tyler back to the place where it had all started. The building was finished now, a beautiful residential complex that Tyler had helped build from the ground up. They stood looking at it together, Elijah's arm around Tyler's shoulders. "You did good work here," Elijah said. "You've come a long way from that green kid who showed up in brand new boots." "I had a good teacher," Tyler said, leaning into Elijah's solid warmth. "Tyler," Elijah said, turning to face him, "I brought you here because this is where your life changed, where you took a chance on something that seemed impossible, where you were brave enough to reach for what you wanted instead of playing it safe." "Best decision I ever made," Tyler said honestly. "Mine too." Elijah pulled a small box from his pocket, and Tyler's breath caught. "I want to keep making decisions with you. I want to build a life with you the way we built this building. Solid, strong, something that lasts. Tyler Brooks, will you marry me?" Tyler's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the ring, simple and perfect, then up at Elijah's face, at the love and hope he saw there. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "God, yes." They kissed there in front of the building they'd created together, two men who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The wedding was small, just close family and the crew from the construction site. Jake served as Elijah's best man and gave a speech about how he'd never seen his friend happier than he'd been since Tyler entered his life. Tyler's sister was his person of honor and cried through the entire ceremony. When they exchanged vows, Tyler promised to always be honest, to trust Elijah with his vulnerabilities, to build a life together that was as solid as the structures they created with their hands. Elijah promised to always see Tyler, to cherish him, to be the partner Tyler deserved, to love him fiercely and completely for all their days. They honeymooned by visiting construction sites around the country, Tyler having developed a genuine love for the work, for creating things that would last. Elijah had started his own contracting company by then, and Tyler worked alongside him as a full partner, both in business and in life. 5 years after that first day, they stood together on another job site, this time working on affordable housing for families in need. Tyler had his own crew now, had become the kind of foreman who saw potential in green kids and gave them chances the way Elijah had given him one. "Remember when you couldn't even swing a hammer properly?" Elijah teased, watching Tyler direct his crew with easy confidence. "Remember when you tried to pretend you weren't attracted to me?" Tyler shot back with a grin. Elijah pulled him close, not caring who saw. "Worst 3 weeks of my life trying to keep my hands to myself." "Well, you don't have to anymore," Tyler said, going up on his toes to kiss his husband. They'd built something beautiful together. Not just buildings, though they'd created plenty of those, but a life, a partnership, a love that was as solid and enduring as the best construction. Tyler had shown up to that job site 5 years ago, lost and desperate and unsure of who he was or what he wanted. He'd found himself in the process of finding Elijah, had discovered desires he didn't know existed, capabilities he'd never explored, a version of himself that was braver and stronger and more authentic than he'd ever been before. And it all started with a moment of courage in a Porta-John, with a man who saw him and wanted him and taught him what it meant to be truly alive. That night, lying in bed with Elijah's arms around him, Tyler thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first day when he'd looked at Elijah and felt his world shift, to the Porta-John where everything changed, to this moment, married and happy and exactly where he was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Elijah murmured sleepily. "Just how lucky I am," Tyler said, "that I showed up to that job site, that you gave me a chance, that I was brave enough to tell you how I felt." "I'm the lucky one," Elijah disagreed. "You walked into my life and showed me what I'd been missing, showed me that love doesn't follow a schedule or make logical sense. Sometimes it just happens, when you least expect it, with someone who should be completely wrong, but turns out to be absolutely perfect." They made love that night with the easy familiarity of long practice and the passion that had never dimmed, and Tyler marveled, as he often did, at how much his life had changed because he'd been willing to take a risk, to acknowledge his desires, to reach for what he wanted instead of hiding behind what was safe and expected. He'd been a virgin at 23, terrified and inexperienced and utterly clueless about his own sexuality. Now he was a confident man who knew exactly who he was and what he wanted, a man who'd built a career he loved, a marriage that fulfilled him, a life that made him happy to wake up every morning, all because of one massive foreman who'd seen potential in a green kid and decided he was worth the effort, who'd taken the time to teach him not just about construction, but about desire and pleasure and love, who'd been patient with his inexperience, gentle with his vulnerability, and fierce in his devotion. Years later, when Tyler trained new crew members and saw that same lost look he'd once had, he thought about Elijah's words from that very first day. Sometimes you had to give people a chance, had to see past the surface to the potential underneath. Sometimes the best things came from taking risks on people who seemed like long shots. He'd been that long shot once, and Elijah had bet on him anyway. Now Tyler paid that forward, giving chances to kids who needed them, teaching them not just about construction, but about believing in themselves, about finding their own strength, about being brave enough to reach for what they wanted. And every night, he went home to Elijah, to the man who'd changed his life, to the love they'd built together from that first explosive moment of connection. Some people might have judged them for how it started, in a Porta-John on a construction site, urgent and desperate and completely inappropriate. But Tyler wouldn't change a single thing, because that moment had been real, had been honest, had been two people finally acknowledging what they'd been denying for weeks. And from that moment, they'd built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty. Tyler had learned a lot in his years in construction. He'd learned how to read blueprints and swing a hammer and manage a crew. But the most important thing he'd learned was this: sometimes the best foundations are built on the most unlikely beginnings. Sometimes what seems impossible turns out to be exactly what you need. And sometimes love finds you in the least expected places, with the least expected people, in the least expected ways. He'd found his in the arms of a massive foreman who'd seen him, really seen him, and decided he was worth keeping, worth teaching, worth loving. And that had made all the difference.